Well, what a weekend we've just seen, and where the hell do we start? Well, we're going to start this morning with the big breaking news. Conor McKeown has a story on the back of the Herald that Bernard Brogan is out for the season potentially.
Yeah, I may as well just hold up the paper. Brogan, horror injury is the headline. Dub veteran advised to beat cruciate blow. That's Conor McKeown's story there, as you mentioned, Ger. He turns 34 in April, Bernard Brogan. There's a good chance now he's going to miss the entire year. If he gets surgery on this, he's probably not going to play again until 2019. And as I say, at the age of 34, going into the 2019 calendar year, will Bernard Brogan play football again in a Dublin jersey? That remains to be seen. What he does point out in the story, McKeown, is that Michael Darragh Macaulay managed to recover fully from it without going under the knife. And if Brogan goes along that route, he might be back again this summer.
So basically, the full nature of how bad cruciate injury it is, whether or not it's his ACL or his PCL, whether or not it's ruptured, whether or not it's just strain/damage. We don't know that yet, but you would expect that they'll do everything they can to avoid surgery, because ultimately that would mean this season is gone. And as you've said, he'd be 35 next April by the time the 2019 championship rolled around. It's hard for anybody to get back, but again, you know, you look at Bernard Brogan and you think he won't want to finish his career like this. So if anybody is going to knuckle down and come back and give it one last season, then maybe Bernard Brogan is the person who can do that.
Maybe. It is very disappointing from his perspective, though. Just kind of the way, did we see a bit of a renaissance at the end of last year from Bernard Brogan? Did we start to see things where he started to accept his role a little bit?
I think as well, you saw at the start of the league campaign that he was starting games. So he'd obviously wintered really well with the express intention of making sure that he was going to go out in a high if this was going to be his last year, where I think he was kind of raging against that subs role a little bit.
Yeah. But all of a sudden, Bernard Brogan will come back into the team maybe next year, and Colm Basquel is a year older, Howard is a year older, Niall Scully's a year older, three people who've come up at a different level again over the last couple of games for Dublin. Bernard Brogan isn't getting his place back next year, you'd expect. Paul Mannion is probably still developing. Dean Rock is still going to be there. Paddy Andrews is going to be there. It's going to be a very, very difficult task for Bernard Brogan to get back into even like a 23-man panel for a championship match for next summer if he misses all of this year. So it is a serious blow for him, but it remains to be seen what the exact kind of course of action Dublin are going to take with regards to the recovery. Yeah, sport is unbearably cruel. We've seen it with injuries just finishing careers so often, where you really hope that somebody's going to get that one last opportunity to wave goodbye and kind of have that moment. I heard Luke Fitzgerald talking about the fact that he ends up, his last ever game is that final against Connacht, and never gets the opportunity to say goodbye. Yeah. You know, comes off injured and it was like, grand, career over. This could be something similar with this. I wonder, could there be kind of a sense of kind of like the Gooch injury in 2014, which occurred around the same time of the year, where Brogan comes back in around August or September, is never going to be match fit, but is fit enough to train with the squad, is fit enough and kind of is doing enough to be a mental presence within the camp. Like, is he somebody who gives a lot to the camp off the pitch? I presume he is, because he's Bernard Brogan. And he was there through the hard years and has now kind of created and has been the instigator of this amazing team on the pitch. So I think he could certainly pave a path for himself in that regard if he's fit enough to kick a ball, or at least do a couple of laps to the pitch come July, August time. But even that is a big ask. Undoubtedly the biggest GAA story of the morning. There's loads more GAA to talk about. We'll talk with Danny Hughes a little bit later on in the show about the specifics of a GAA weekend, in particular the level of coaching that's going on. One of his best mates is partly responsible for what's happening in Galway at the moment, so we'll get his thoughts on that a little bit later on as well. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us, you can drop us a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're on Periscope, or of course if you're on Facebook, you can leave us a comment as well, and you can always email us too. But let's turn our attention to the rugby now. Here's Bundy Aki post-match speaking with Oisín.
After the first two games of the Six Nations, you must be happy with where you're at.
Yeah, I think we're very happy with the result that we got, but as you can see in that game, there was a lot of stuff that we need to work on for next week, which is a good week that we have down. And you know, the good thing about it is that we've got a lot of things to work on, and we can regrow as a team again.
What are those work-ons?
Just our executions, myself included. You know, just the little simple things, catching the ball, holding onto the ball and building phases from there. And you know, we're slowly growing as a team, and you can see that on the field there.
Joe said you were nearly too eager at times, and that's where some of the handling errors came from. He also said that the Italians really rushed up and made it difficult. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, it is very accurate. You know, Italians put us on a lot of pressure. You know, Italian is a good team out there. You can see they're playing with a lot of pride now and playing with a lot of heart, and it was difficult to throw the ball around, especially with that kind of pressure that Italy put on upon us. So, hey, look, we just regroup again next week and look to the week to refresh again and look forward to another challenge.
Andy Dunne is with us. Good morning to you. How you doing?
Hi, Jerry.
Italy pretty shite.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, a really disappointing first 20 minutes. They did show they have the ability, and they showed it in the England game, to carve a team open, albeit when the game is broken up. And they did finish well in those 2 to 3 moments. But yeah, the first 20 to 30 minutes were hugely disappointing from their point of view. Yeah.
All of the things that we traditionally have associated with Italian rugby just not true anymore. When somebody like Tadhg Furlong goes off 2 minutes in, and the first piece of action next is a scrum, you think, ooh, this is going to be really interesting to see the Italians kind of pile through and see what they can do on this brand new guy who's not really playing in his normal position. I mean, okay, so it's going to be his position for the rest of his career, but like there was nothing.
Yeah, they would have built a lot around the likes of Castro, Giovanni and these type of players historically, who were around 10 to 15 years and were stalwarts for their side, particularly up front.
Yeah.
So they were always that kind of physical, abrasive type side that were, took 60 minutes to break down. They've replaced those guys with inexperience, and that's just unfortunate timing for them in terms of a cycle. So yeah, your typical pre-match chit-chat about the Italians doesn't apply anymore. Just like you said, that was a gentle introduction to international scrummaging for Andrew Porter. It's as good as he could have hoped for, because he's very, very strong around the field. He contributes both defensively, contributes a lot, in terms of how he carries the ball. But to be able to ease his way into international rugby from a scrummaging point of view, probably is not going to happen again after the Italian game.
Almost, it seems almost as if the team selection for this game had been decided a fair bit out by Joe Schmidt, that ultimately he had a lot of confidence in his team to be able to win that game and to secure the bonus point, and that was really all he cared about. But also giving people game time was the key thing he was looking from that, that and maybe not conceding tries. So was it job done, or did the 3 tries actually rankle to the point where there's a testy enough video session at some point this week?
Well, as the Irish Times, there's a quote from him. He uses this kind of sugar-coated language, but Dunleavy did some good stuff, slipped off one tackle that he'll be disappointed with, and let's hope it's a springboard to make sure he doesn't do it again, which I think basically means I'm really disappointed in him, and if he does it again, he won't be playing. Yeah. So that would be more akin to his what he really means. But Levy himself would be disappointed with that. But I think it wasn't a defensive system error he made. He was just outdone for pace by a guy who's an outside back against the 7. Larmer made kind of a one-man individual mistake as opposed to a system error again. So in terms of the 3 tries he conceded, the Irish team conceded Joe. I'd say 2 of them are down to one-on-one kind of individual errors, which no doubt he'll hope they're springboards to not doing it again, as he puts it. But I wouldn't say he's overly concerned. I think if he had 2 or 3 complete system breakdowns, he'd be quite concerned going into the Wales game. But he can probably isolate the incidents and put the squeeze on the player as an individual and say, look, it can't happen again. But probably an easier pill to swallow than 3 system errors.
Eddie O'Sullivan was saying at the Times this morning that the first try for Italy came as a result of Ireland stacking too many men on the wrong side of the ruck, and that's just a schoolboy error. Would you classify that as a system breakdown? Yeah,
it's probably a club player error as well, because myself and Eddie coach Belvo, and we've made the same mistake ourselves. So that's one level higher than schoolboy. I think, all in all, it's not. I don't think it's anything that either supporters or the Irish management are going to be overly concerned with. Every once in a while, in an 80-minute game, you're going to stack up the wrong way in terms of numbers. It's usually about players having the wherewithal to look downfield as opposed to inwards towards a dead ruck. And if they can make a decision in that way by looking further downfield and stacking up numbers in the opposition, it's usually easily rectified.
It's an interesting one, because you look at Italy and, as Ger correctly pointed out, they are shite. But at the same time, you start to wonder then, as a result of that, is there a switch off in the Ireland mentality at a certain point in the match? Or, I just don't buy that at all, because Joe Schmidt doesn't wire any of his players. You can't be a Joe Schmidt player and allow yourself to switch off like that and let in 3 tries essentially against a terrible team.
Well, I'm not sure. I know he doesn't wire his teams that way, and players would be fearful of switching off, but I think there was a palpable sense of them switching off for 15 minutes. Even at the ground itself, the tries were kind of soft. The tries happened with relative ease. Italy didn't have to work for them. And I just think maybe Keith Earls' chase back in the second last minute was a reminder that people needed to have a kind of higher level of intensity when they work under Joe. And perhaps Earls, as a senior player, was trying to instill that into the group as well by working so hard, because I don't think it's something that Joe's teams are, it's not recognisable in most of his sides, but I really thought there was a 15-minute switch-off period. I think it can be inevitable. You know, they were 42-0 up at one stage, and he won't be happy with it, but I definitely think there was a concentration lapse, and explaining it simply in that sense of sports psychology wise, they definitely just switched off.
Yeah, it's hard not to. A couple of points there from Brian O'Driscoll. I thought Rob Kearney was excellent today for someone that had that pressure of alarm on the benches all around game, was top class, and brutal on Robbie Henshaw too. He's become a very important leader in that team. In the immediate aftermath, Schmidt was not ruling Robbie Henshaw out for any specific amount of time, because he's not a doctor, but basically we all kind of saw the nature of the injury and it doesn't look good. He's not really quite replaceable in a like for like. We have some depth in the centre, but definitely Robbie Henshaw's at a level, it appears anyway at the moment, that is higher than everybody else that's there in terms of his defensive capabilities and also just his general game awareness.
Yeah, he's been excellent. He's grown into that role in the last couple of seasons. But I did think Bundy Aki was excellent at 13. His contribution in broken field running, his passing was excellent. He'd one very poor pass early in the game. We ran it from deep and left to right. He threw it behind someone. Again, that'd be something that Joe would hope he'll springboard back from again, I'd imagine. But if he moved into 12, I think with a fit, which is not going to happen, I don't think, by the time the Wales game comes around. If he was to play 12 and Ringrose at 13, I think would be the ideal replacement. But I think the practicality is going to suggest Chris Farrell will go in straight in at 12 and Bundy at 13. So, Henshaw's going to be a big loss. I suppose looking at it from the mechanism of the injury, it's highly unlikely he's going to get away with being able to play again maybe this year. If he has dislocated the shoulder, he'll probably need surgery, given the level of physical attrition that runs down his channel. If you go in there with a compromised shoulder without getting surgically fixed again, he's going to just keep popping it out.
And these are the type of injuries that unfortunately linger. Like, there's always just a doubt, and perpetually after you have had this happen, they do the surgery, and then we've seen so often that it happens again. So it's just it's horrible luck really for him. Yeah,
it's really, and he probably, he'll probably think back and mull it over 10, 15 times. Why didn't I try to put the ball down in a different way? It wasn't even an attacking situation. So it's just hugely unlucky.
What did you think of the Earls and Aki combination in midfield for the brief moment we got to see it?
Yeah, well, I think Aki had grown into the game, done very well. At that stage, he was very comfortable. Earls is probably playing the best rugby of his career at the moment, but I actually think he's playing it because he's settled into playing in one position. He's playing on the wing, he's comfortable, he's no longer chopping and changing between 13, wing, fullback. So, yeah, he didn't do anything wrong in there, but I would imagine Joe's going to put him straight back out onto the wing.
It just doesn't seem beyond the bounds of possibility to me when I was watching it the other day. You mentioned bringing Chris Farrell in there, and just purely out of experience, it does seem to me, for the points you just outlined, that Chris Farrell is the best replacement and keep Earls in the wing. But part of me thinks Fergus McFadden could come back in on the wing and leave Earls in midfield, and suddenly you've got a spread of reliable players who've played Test rugby at a high level, like consistently.
Well, I think one of the things Joe was trying to do is, and he's introduced it it was probably visible from the November series, is he wants a bit more distribution from his centres as well. And Farrell, albeit 6'4", very physical and probably known for that part of his game, his passing's been excellent, and he's done it really well for Munster as well. So I think Joe sees that as quite a weapon. And in one of the November series, we ran a couple of plays where Farrell at 12 through 25 yard passes on the run off his left hand side, and I think that's something that Joe is now seeing a real value in, is distribution in that channel, much like Owen Farrell is doing with England. So if you were to put Aki and Earls in there, maybe you wouldn't have that. So yeah, it's probably something Joe is going to look at, which is an area. Chris Farrell's game, he's not noted for it, but I think it's an area that's developing and undervalued.
Jordan Larmour was asked afterwards by the media what his favourite position is, and he says centre or wing, which obviously somebody pointed out that's good news for Rob Kearney, but you don't really get to pick your position anymore. That's not really how it works. When you're a professional, you're told that's where you're going, and we want you on the ball more often than not.
Well, I tend to agree with, even though he's 19, 20, I tend to agree with Jordan. I think the way the game has developed in terms of close quarters, such a lack of space. If a guy with that footwork, he had one unbelievable piece of play where he left an Italian guy just fall over with his footwork and then accelerated from two others. And in close quarters, we've probably only one or two guys who can do that. Carberry is another one, and he's obviously going to be he is behind Johnny, and maybe if you want to break the game up, but guys playing in a central role who can attack space or create space are invaluable. The All Blacks do it all the time. They play guys out of position in more central roles to create space further out wide. So I think longer term it's really worth considering, can a guy like that move a bit more central, and we'd be more dynamic.
And would fullback not be the kind of perfect mix of that, where you get him on the ball deep quite a lot, but also you can put him in as first receiver or second receiver from set plays or from certain rucks anytime you want?
Well, I look at the likes of Darcy. Gordon Darcy in 1998 was a fullback and a winger, and eventually Gary Allen moved him into 12. And in his first Six Nations he tore it up, because in that central role we suddenly had a team that could create space in the kind of close quarters, high traffic zone, and Darcy's footwork was what did it. And much like that with Larmour, I'd say in time, maybe with a bit more maturity, he could convert in there. You'd
have been training with Darcy. Was it clear that he could play there from the get-go, or was it kind of everybody a bit surprised?
I think I falsely took credit for this one year, but we were training, trying to run a particular play. I remember it was like early 2000, and he was always a fullback wing. There were injuries in training, and he came in and ran the play seamlessly where the other centres couldn't. And I remember just flagging it with him and saying nobody else could do that. Obviously then I'm trying to take credit for it.
Go for it.
Should have put him in, but Gary Allen was the one who identified it. It wasn't, I don't think it was on anybody's radar until Gary Allen came along, but it was a career changer for him, and it helped Irish rugby now end. So
he could still have been an amazing fullback though, right? Like,
I think he, and a really good winger with it. So I just think games are so boring at times. People are just running into each other, falling down. 38 rucks later, you've moved 10 metres. Guys who can break the game up are just, they're diamonds.
It was interesting because Ronan OGara was asked about his first month down in New Zealand, and he was saying that they're not big on protocol in terms of what everybody wears. So you're looking out from training kind of a field away going, which ones are the backs and which ones are the forwards, and he couldn't tell the difference in terms of the ball skills, and that actually they as a group aren't putting huge amounts of store on size and physicality. It's all about who's going to create space for me, who is actually going to avoid that hit, as opposed to, I saw somebody refer to it, selfishly taking contact today in one of the papers. I can't remember who it was now, but you're thinking that's what the game really, really needs to get back to a level where we're actually, where the Jordan Larmours are, let's get this guy in the team, and let's find a way to have him and Keith Earls and a much smaller backline maybe than the 2 6'5" centres.
The game kind of comes and goes in cycles. In the 70s it was like that. In the 80s it was very fractured too. As teams introduced defensive coaches into the game, which probably happened from the mid-90s, and the game became professional, space became more difficult to find, and players started to get instructed to maintain possession, because higher risk, high reward. If you lose the ball and teams are well organised in defence against you, you're in trouble. So the advent of the defensive coach changed the game. What's happening now, I think, is that there's a movement back again towards let's attack space. The All Blacks are, on record saying they won't prescribe their attacking play beyond 1 or 2 phases because they're trying to entrust players to make the right choice at the right time and assuming that they've got the skill level to execute that. Ireland don't play like that at the moment, but I'd say Schmidt would like to move towards that with the right playing personnel, with the right skill level.
I wondered, you had to have won something before you free your players to do that. Like, you look at how New Zealand got the monkey off their back and won the World Cup. It was with incredibly prescriptive rugby.
Absolutely, yeah.
To the point where, allegedly, Richie McCaw could make decisions on the field, but it does seem as if Graham Henry was like in there in his ear every 2 seconds. Are you sure about that now? You don't really want to do this? Whereas now, obviously, they're free to do it because they've got over that. Like, and you see it in loads of sports where a team stutters over the line the first time and then suddenly releases their creative juices afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, they were carrying that for 20 years, really, from the 87 World Cup and the notable failed attempts in 99, 2003, 2007. So yeah, they did crawl their way over, but it's a great thing for rugby that they did because they are kind of reinventing the attacking side of the game, and as the best team in the world, teams inevitably are going to try and copy them. When South Africa won the World Cup in 07, it was bad news because it was just awful stuff. They 6'7" guys above 6'5" in the pack who just ran into brick walls all day, and naturally people are going to emulate success, and the 07 World Cup was bad news for everyone. But,
I want to play this clip. It's Fiona Steed talking about why we need to improve for the Wales game. Have a look. No, we'll get to it in a second. Oh, we don't actually have it. Grant.
Just one point on that, in terms of playing in a back three for Ireland, and we've mentioned Rob Kearney, we've mentioned Jordan Larmour. So was running the ball from our own 22 a tactic especially for Italy, or do we expect it to see it later on in the competition? AKA, can we see this kind of thing working in Jordan Larmour's favour tactically?
I think it's a strategic choice to start moving the ball out from our own territory with handling, as opposed to we would have traditionally set a guy to run up the middle, stood one of our kickers deep, passed back into our 22 and kicked long. But teams are probably looking at that and saying, okay, you're going to give it to the opposition around the halfway line and you have to be very organised in defence. Now they're looking at, can they move the ball across the back line? If the opposition defence moves up, you can kick it over their head. If they don't, and there's a little bit of space out wide, you run the risk of a handling error deep in your own territory, but you'd like to think international players can accommodate that across the back line, 2 to 3 passes. It's not that high risk, and you're holding on to possession. And as opposed to being 50 metres away from your own try line without the ball, you might be 35, 40 metres away from your try line with the ball. So they're prepared to trade off that 10, 15 metre territory gain. I think it's a strategic choice by Joe. I saw England do it straight from the kick-off as well in the Wales game. I think it's probably a trend again, and a favourable trend for a supporter looking at the game. So yeah, I think he's doing it on purpose.
I do want to move on to the Wales game, so we can have a look at this now. It's Fiona Steed and what we need to do to improve for the Wales game.
Well, with the Wales game in mind, exactly, Fiona, I think if we're that open against a team like Italy, there's got to be big concerns there. Obviously Wales kick off against England shortly, but big concerns ahead of that game in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but I think it's a number of things. We touched on at half-time how they'd reset and refocus and what their aims were for the second half, but I don't think it'll happen in a tighter game. And so also concentration and also the number of changes then, but you can bet when they come to reviewing this next week, it won't be, oh God, how did we score the tries? It'll be how did we let them in,
I think Larmour might have been caught on the outside for one of them actually.
Yeah, and that's probably a learning for him as well. And God, he didn't score on his first touch. God, that must be disappointing. Was it shocking? Wasn't it?
Well, to be honest, it was a bit disappointing now.
But look, they look at that, but I think it's hard sometimes to build yourselves up when you're winning so much, and Wales will come here thinking that Wales can win. Yeah,
Wales are 11-point underdogs for the game against Ireland. It's ridiculous. That's a 3-point game either way. Not only that, they're going to have Liam Williams back to start. North came off the bench, and maybe he is only a sub now. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, there was a bit where it looked like he was going to get trapped and ultimately make 60 yards. And think, okay, that's probably why he's in the team. But there was another bit where he kind of completely overran an opportunity that he had. So, you know, it's win and lose with George North. They'll have Halfpenny back as well. And I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't make Wales massive underdogs heading into this game.
I don't fully agree. It's a 2 to 3 point game. It's going to be a hugely stressful build-up for Ireland.
Warren Gatland stirring.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, it was quite good entertainment pre-England and Wales, watching Eddie Jones and Gatland go at it head to head. So, no doubt, there's going to be that edge. It's a pity Sean O'Brien won't be available, because it would have added an extra bit of spice to the occasion. But I think
if you were Joe Schmidt, would you wheel Sean O'Brien out this week just to remind, come on Sean, out you go, you can take the pressure off everybody here?
Well, you know, I've seen stranger things have happened. You know, put a guy up there, get him to say one or two things in terms of stirring it up. I think Joe typically isn't the type where he's the aggressor in these situations. He doesn't court that kind of publicity the same way Gatland and Jones do. I think Joe by nature is very understated and deflective and tries to manage expectations, always dampen things down. The other two guys are a bit more punchy and go on the attack in these, you know, notorious psychological exchanges, you know, mid-Six Nations.
Yeah, Eddie Jones getting a bit of criticism for attacking the Wales 10 in the build-up to the game. That's kind of what he does, and so you need to be able to distance yourself from it and somehow not read it or not hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, Rhys Patchell, you got to think he's okay with that. He, as a player, you know, it was interesting. There was a high ball went up early on from England, and I can't remember, it might have been Jonathan Joseph just got up ahead of Patchell, and the commentators started talking about, you know, had Eddie Jones got into Patchell's head. It was nothing to do with Eddie Jones. It was to do with Jonathan Joseph could jump higher, and that was it. So that was from that immediate play. Owen Farrell kicked a beautiful grubber about 40 metres that Johnny May scored on, which I think incidentally was a genius piece of play by Farrell. But in terms of the psychological battles, regardless of what Gatland is going to do, and I'm sure he's going to do at least one thing that's going to, you know, stir it up, if not many, many more. I think that the players will probably expect it, and probably more often than not will welcome it, and it'll add a bit of spice to the occasion. It'll keep everyone switched on in the lead up. So I don't think it's an issue either for Joe or the players. It would be interesting to see if they do kind of spring a surprise from their own end and introduce someone like Sean O'Brien to the media again. Might be a nice choice.
And they can
deflect attention.
They can even have their fingerprints off it, and you can just do some corporate gig where it's like, by the way, I just have this to say about
Warren.
Tullow Rugby Club are having another launch. They're launching another new training pitch next week, I hear.
Oisin's available to do the interview again. Two big decisions incorrect from the TMO, both involving Wales, one in their favour against Scotland and one against them against England. Does it feel like the view that the TMO decisions are being rushed after the comments that they were taking too long? That's Colm McCullough. And Mark Redmond also says, what's the point of the TMO when the ref makes his own mind up and the video ref always agrees? Talking about previous games more so than the England-Wales match, but obviously in the context of the England-Wales match. Was it a wrong decision?
Yeah, 100%.
Did he have enough downward pressure and control of the ball?
It's as strange a decision I've seen by a TMO. I mean, it was as clear cut. You could see downward pressure. You know, they magnified the image. There's the hand on the ball, there's placement, there's downward pressure. It's a cast iron try. How they got it wrong, I can't work it out.
And it changes the course of that game massively.
Hugely.
England have this bulletproof confidence, except
absolutely.
Like, I can't wait to see this England team go behind properly, you know.
Yeah.
And actually...
Well, we saw them last year do it, and they didn't come back in Aviva. So, it's... I don't know how frustrated you could possibly be if you were Wales at a crucial part of the game on a clear-cut try. And, you know, it's different to the football where they don't have it and everyone's complaining about it. When you do have it, you got to expect to get it right.
Yeah. like that's why I would say this Welsh team are really dangerous for us, because their entire tournament depends on them winning against us. And then us doing them a favour and France doing them a favour. Like they got the losing bonus point, which was a big thing for them, because it gives them some hope of still winning the entire competition.
Yeah, it keeps them in the race. Yeah, they're dangerous. They're a dangerous bunch. They're Gatland is a kind of, he's an opportunist. He always has been, and albeit he's missing 7 British Lions, he'll still find a way to be effective. So yeah, just one of those games that it's a huge potential banana skin for Ireland. The Welsh lads are going to love it. They're going to absolutely love leading up to, stirring it up, the psychological warfare, the fact that they've 7 or 8 guys missing, even though they've 1 or 2 coming back, and they will promote the Ireland favourites tag non-stop.
Do we think that Warren Gatland has mellowed out a little bit? Because we've mentioned the psychological warfare there, but I would have expected Gatland of old to come back biting at Eddie Jones. Maybe there was maybe Gatland just went first in the press conferences, and I'm reading into this a little bit too much, and there was no time for Gatland to hit back before Friday's print. But to me, that says that, Gatland kind of let it slide to a certain extent.
I wouldn't have thought so, no. I think for whatever reason he chose not to answer on that occasion. I wouldn't suggest that's a journey towards enlightenment and being mellowed and mindful for Warren. I don't think both Warren, Eddie and Joe, and most of these guys who coach at international level have a deep level of competition in their body and their mind that they've long memories, they hold grudges, they don't forget things, and that's part of their nature and why they're successful. So I'd say Warren just chose to ignore that comment.
Right. I think with the Eddie Jones thing as well, there's a certain element of a placebo effect about it, that he picks the weakest target. There's a good chance they're not going to have a good game anyway, and suddenly he thinks to himself, well, my mind games clearly was the main contributor behind it.
Yeah, well, I think Eddie Jones' style has always been, pull the grenade, throw it in and just walk away. And he doesn't really care what happens after that. He started it, and as soon as it starts, he gets on with training his guys, and he'll probably throw something else into the mix 2-3 days later to freshen it all up again. But I don't know how much value he's placing on his own comments. I think they're there as a distraction, and he'll get on with his team training session then, probably 15 minutes after he's made the comments. So. And
it's working for him, obviously, because their record is sensational under him. I do wonder if it's a real thing, that if there's so he comes in and he mines that seam of English arrogance and says we're supposed to be arrogant, that's what our culture is, and they respond to it, and that's great and everything, but we're very far out from a World Cup, and it just, I don't know. I want to see them tested over a sustained period of time and let them come through that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see them playing. I think, have they a 3-test tour of New Zealand in the summer? I'm not
We're
sure.
in Australia.
I think New Zealand come to the Northern Hemisphere obviously in November.
Okay. I would love to see them playing the New Zealand team. Well, one thing I would say about Jones and his comments is you could argue it's refreshing. I mean, everybody manages expectations. Everybody says we all knew it was going to be tough, and everyone falls asleep. You got a guy coming out and saying we are the best in the world. We want to be the best in the world. He's won 23 out of 24 games. It's
again.
Is it refreshing? I don't.
He's talking about going to the World Cup and winning, as opposed to we're all going to be talking about, can we win a quarter final at the World Cup?
Yeah.
And so say we win a quarter final, right? Just say the miracle happens. Do we then go, all right, we can go home, thanks very much, we're done?
Yeah.
How do you flip that?
I think the private expectations will be very different to what's publicly articulated. I think Ireland and Joe will never ever go on record to say our expectations are to go and win anything. He just doesn't operate that way. But I don't think behind closed doors there's any doubt that this Irish team believe they can win a Grand Slam, win the Six Nations. Whether they deep down believe they can win a World Cup, who knows?
That's why winning the Grand Slam is important, right? Because it gives you, in the 10 minutes to go in that quarter final, when we need a drop goal, we're like, we've done this before, it's okay, we can be calm about it, as opposed to, we've never done this before.
Yeah. Well, it's probably much like the All Blacks, carrying that millstone around their neck for 20 years of not winning the World Cup. I think it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue that a nation has established ourselves, making a quarter-final of a World Cup, given our recent 10 to 15 years. That's a huge issue for us. And if it doesn't happen this time around, God help us.
Andrew Porter was saying in the post-match comments that we've got better depth than England. Do you agree with that?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, we've got better depth than ever before from an Irish perspective, but the English game still has 12 sides to pick from, and the Premiership still has a huge amount of money, still has a greater playing pool in terms of numbers. So, no, I don't agree with Andrew on that one.
I think that's a fair point, really. Yeah. One last question. France are still flaky. The game was there for them to win yesterday, and they just couldn't bring themselves to do the right things to see a game out on the road. They were like, no, we're still going to be this French team, even though their identity is still slightly schizophrenic.
Yeah, I think Tony Ward coined the phrase the French disconnection, which is probably as good a summary as you can get. They're disjointed. They are apparently without any real direction or purpose, but that's exactly why they're always so dangerous. And if we're on the theme of World Cups that we've been discussing, permeated throughout the conversation, they're always thereabouts. I mean, they've been in 3 World Cup finals. Obviously they never won it, but for whatever reason they seem to get it right in terms of timing. Again, it could be just that their mentality. They can. Bernard Jackman recently spoke about how in the French game, if it goes right within the game itself, they can seem to evolve to a different level, even within an 80-minute period, despite the fact that their 2 weeks preparation might have been god-awful in between. So it's not something that we tend to have in Ireland or England, that we see 2 bad weeks of preparation usually leads to a poor performance. So it's not the case. Very enigmatic and French and a cliche. But
finally, someone who is living up to their stereotypes, the Six Nations. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Andy, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. There's one last rugby story that we're going to cover. Brendan O'Brien was in doing the papers with Richie and Johnny Murphy yesterday when the subject of Joe Schmidt not speaking to the written press in his huddle after the press conference came up. Have a look.
I think it's Peter O'Reilly just has a small little
it was mentioned in the lead up to yesterday's game that Schmidt wouldn't be conducting his regular post-match huddle with the written daily newspapers after answering questions from all the media at the conclusion of the game. The Ireland coach traditionally then briefs the daily titles, giving quotes which are available from Monday's papers. However, yesterday's huddle was cancelled at short notice with no reason given. It's the first time that this has happened in Schmidt's 52 tests in charge. It's down to, according to O'Reilly, the coverage from one journalist of the Gerbrand Grobler case, and Grobler, of course, made his senior Munster bow last night as well. It seems odd that this is the reasoning for Schmidt to decide to close you guys off.
You see, I don't know for sure that is the reason. I'm a member of the Rugby Writers of Ireland, and I don't know for sure what exactly the reasoning that has been given. Was an
actual reason given yesterday?
I'm still confused by it, to be quite honest. I mean, this has been a big internal issue for rugby writers all week, and we've said this off air, Richie. I mean, people listening to journalists giving out will it'll make people throw stones at their radios.
People are turning on Crimea River by Timberlake.
Exactly. But look, there is a wider issue on it. In terms of this, it's quite confusing. What I will say is the relationship between the Irish media, the Irish rugby media, and the IRFU and Joe Schmidt and his team is probably at an all-time low. Not just Joe Schmidt's team, but an Irish rugby team. And this is going back. We have members who were covering the Irish rugby team in the 1990s when we couldn't buy a win. So the relationship is at an all-time low. Access is being squeezed. We've lost access to a number of coaches, a number of players from what we had this time last year. And what we're seeing is, as we're seeing with a number of sports, is we're seeing a sports organisation that is putting ever more focus on their own media offerings, so their own media platforms, whether it's social media or their own, Irish Rugby TV in this instance or whatever. And the inference seems to be that they are now in competition with the media. And my point to that would be, I'm sorry guys, but you're an internal PR organisation. You're effectively Pravda and we're not. So there's going to be, I don't see how competition is the correct way of putting it.
So that was Brendan O'Brien on the paper review yesterday. We got in touch with Peter O'Reilly, the Sunday Times, this morning to see if he could come on and chat to us about this, because obviously we'd like to get to the bottom of it. But Peter said he couldn't come on, and that it wasn't actually his words in the paper. So it's kind of difficult to get to the bottom of exactly what's going on here. Just to clarify, after every match, Joe Schmidt will do his broadcast partners, that's a mandated contractual thing. So you'll see Sinead Kassan interview Joe after every game, and the radio rights holders will also get access to him. And then there's a 15-minute press conference for all media. So that's the electronic, that's digital, that's radio, and that's the print. But subsequent to that, traditionally, and for the last 52 games apparently, Schmidt would always have done a huddle with the daily written press, and those quotes would be kept until Monday morning so that they would have fresh content, which would be different and a slightly more considered view. And obviously it's just the Irish media that he would have been doing it for. That was cancelled this week, but the issue seems to have arisen in the aftermath of the French game, where Schmidt said that he wouldn't do the huddle where the IRFU said that Schmidt wouldn't do the huddle if a specific journalist was present for it. Now, it appears to me as if that huddle did in fact go ahead, despite the fact that a single individual had been singled out by the IRFU media handlers, which seems to me a little bit of an anomaly, because I would assume that, you know, if one of the journalists isn't going to be spoken to, then all the other journalists would say, okay, well, we're not going to go ahead with this briefing. And that's kind of where that would seem to me to have been the right thing to have happened. But apparently the journalist went ahead with it anyway. And in the Irish Times today, Johnny Waterson has a few more details. He says, last week in Paris, a missive was delivered to the press corps that one of the members of the Rugby Writers of Ireland would not be allowed to attend the traditional post-match briefing. The ban was because of an honest error made by a journalist on an online article, which was corrected. Subsequently, there was no Irish coach briefing after Ireland's match against Italy for the first time in 52 matches. So there's a line, I think, which everyone says relationship between the Irish rugby writers and the Irish management team are at an all-time low. Now, whether or not this matters, I don't know, but it seems weird that the journalists didn't collectively decide that this was not behaviour befitting of an Ireland coach. It seems odd that rather than everybody deciding collectively that they weren't going to go ahead with the briefing, that they did go ahead with the briefing. The issue there is that at some point, it could be you. At some point, Joe Schmidt will decide, you're the guy that I don't want to talk to today. And unless they all stick together, then there's kind of, you know, because banning journalists, it's a bit like Donald Trump, really.
Yeah, but like, do we know the timeline of the exclusion of this journalist and the proximity of that banning to the actual press conference? Because if it happened, or the huddle, I should say, if that happened right beforehand, then suddenly the journalists are a little bit hamstrung. They're like, right, that's just happened. We've got to go do this now. Do we get together? Do we have a quick meeting before chatting to Joe? Can we get this group together and have a common thing? Of course, the initial instinct should be, okay, we're rowing in behind this guy, but there may not have been enough time to actually think that way. Like, I'm saying that if there was...
how long do you need to do the right thing?
Well, I don't know. So say if this happened and there was no prior warning of there being no print session, and this happened for a second time, kind of split decision, have to do it, right, I've considered what happened earlier on in the week, now we're boycotting it, but we don't know that. I mean, I think in a weird way, the IRFU almost made up the journalists' minds for them, that they didn't have to make that decision after the Italy game on Saturday. There was going to be no daily session anyway. If that went ahead, but that one journalist was banned again, would the journalists have boycotted it? I don't know. That would have been a very interesting thing to see.
Yeah. Again, I'm sure a lot of people don't really care about this, but it does seem odd that a single individual journalist ends up getting singled out for what the Irish Times are reporting, and that's the only people who have reported the reason for it was an honest mistake, which was corrected. What the hell's going on? Where does this, like, so again, this is highly reminiscent of Jim McGuinness, moment of triumph, coming in, singling out Declan Bogue, and the GAA journalists at the time going, oh, that's okay, we're happy with that, that's fine. Or not thinking enough to go, hang on a second, that's unacceptable. So I just think that you've got to be careful with this kind of stuff. And I'm talking as a group of journalists, they needed to decide, no, we don't accept this. Maybe they'll come out now and explain exactly what happened. And maybe the IRFU will come out and explain what journalists get access and why they get access and who's allowed to ask questions and what questions they're allowed to ask. Because it seems to me there's a bit of a vacuum of leadership at the very top of the IRFU. We haven't even spoken about the fact that Grobler made his debut this weekend, and the IRFU's crappy statement last week with the straw man of, oh, some people think that you should never be allowed to come back from a mistake. It's like, well,
that kind of goes exactly against your no tolerance approach to doping.
Well,
I did actually turn that on Saturday night.
It's a lie. It's a lie that Irish rugby has a zero tolerance approach to doping.
Really?
It's a lie. It means nothing. They're just empty, meaningless words. And you should stop lying to us and stop using phrases that don't mean anything, because language is supposed to matter. It's actually supposed to mean something. But if you're saying you have zero tolerance towards something, grand. That's your concept and you've picked it. It means something. Zero tolerance is supposed to mean something. But Irish rugby does not have a zero tolerance policy towards doping in rugby in Ireland.
I was kind of hoping Grobler was just going to come on Saturday night and score a hat-trick or something, that we'd have to resurrect the story once again, but he only resurrected the biggest crowd, or the biggest roar from the crowd of the night, I should say. To be fair, I only watched the second half.
I just watched that bit and rewound it to see what the response was like, and look, that's fine. Munster Rugby have decided that this is somebody that they're happy to represent them, and that's their choice.
Yeah, I think it's gone full siege mentality at this point as well.
All right, let's bring you through the newspaper headlines. The biggest story from all of the newspapers today is the fact that Bernard Brogan has damaged his cruciate. That's an exclusive from Conor McKeown in the Herald this morning, so fair play to him. Always impeccably sourced stories from Conor in Dublin GAA. So Brogan horror injury, when the Herald are printing that about Bernard Brogan, it is bad news, and it's definitely true. So they're just saying that they're not sure if he's going to go for surgery or if he's going to try and rehab it over the course of the summer to see what he can get out of it. I guess that's a decision that ultimately will have a bearing on how much longer he plays football.
A couple of other GAA stories today, mostly focuses around what happened on the pitch over the past couple of days, and in particular in Salt Hill yesterday. See you in May reads the headline on the back of the Irish Independent. The Connacht Council says Martin Brettany could double the entrance price and still be guaranteed a full house for the championship clash. Things getting heated there for sure yesterday in Galway versus Mayo. On the front of the Irish Examiner sports section, it says ground offensive, 3 off as Galway make it 3 from 3 in Division 1. While on the back of the Irish Daily Mail, it says war out west, ugly scenes as Galway and Mayo see red. You've also got Ringrose is the centre of Schmidt's attention. That's the story there, that Gary Ringrose is now, that's going to be the will he won't he story for the next fortnight or so, that's for sure. He was initially said to be back for the Wales game. Whether or not he's going to be match fit, it remains to be seen. You've also got Wild West here on the back of the Irish Daily Star. O'Connor brothers sent off for Mayo in Salt Hill battle. We've also got that story there about Tipperary selector Shane Stapleton, who's in hospital after Ennis incidents. There was an altercation in the sideline where he falls over and bangs his head off the concrete and seriously injures himself. It's a horrible injury. We wish him all the best. Also there on the back of the Irish Daily Star, you've got Liverpool. We're after you, says the headline. Klopp turns up heat on Manchester United.
The Irish Times, the lead story there, Ireland just where they want to be. Furlong will be significant loss if, as expected, he is not fit to face Wales. Tadhg Furlong, it's being reported that he's had a hamstring injury. Mourinho deflects criticism with praise of Newcastle. This is a new tactic from José Mourinho, as opposed to blaming the referee or blaming the crowd noise or blaming whatever. He's decided to go full charm offensive. Rafa Benitez, what a genius. What an amazing place St James's Park is. I always love coming here. And then Schmidt sees the fault in our fledgling stars. This is I guess it is stereotypical Joe Schmidt going, yeah, they were great apart from this and this. It's like he's a harsh taskmaster.
On the back of the Sun, it says hot shot. Klopp, my superstars are coming for United. Mourinho, we could have gone 10 hours and not scored. While on the back of the Mirror, it's tab of the morning to you, Ger. Rich man, poor man United. José Blatz's timid defence as toothless strikers as Matt lifts Toon out of drop zone.
Rich
as in Matt Ritchie. Just a good explainer right there. On the front of the Daily Telegraph sports section, Mourinho's curse strikes again. Struggling Pogba hauled off as United manager's Tyneside jinx goes on. And on the back of the Guardian, finally, it's the same story. Talk of the Tude. Mourinho praises Newcastle's animals after Richie winner.
Our depth is best in Six Nations, Andrew Porter says. That's the headline over Gary Doyle's piece. Andy Dunne has just debunked the notion that we have the best. But, you know, when you've just come off after a match like that, you've played 85 of the 87 or 88 minutes of actual game time, and you're pretty happy with life. Yeah, our depth is great.
I like that, because he was asked a follow-up question after saying that, and he was like, yeah, I stand by that.
Yeah, no, fair play.
Yeah, Andrew Porter was brilliant on Saturday. The only thing is, especially just in his position, you don't want him starting because you know for sure you're going to get 80 minutes of unbelievable quality at that position if Tadhg Furlong is fit. That's the only thing.
Tadhg Furlong's a world superstar.
Yeah, there's no question about that, obviously, but...
somebody had the line, it might actually have been Gary Doyle's piece, that Larmour and Conway were playing schools rugby 4 years ago for the same team. It's like, and here they are in Six Nations, not looking at all out of place. But look, you just want to see somebody like the two of them get into the team in a staged way so that there's not too much pressure on them.
Well, they've done it there now in Italy, but the whole kind of thing that Mike McCarthy made on their Aviva Fan Studio point there is in, like, as soon as Jordan Larmour gets the ball, the Aviva kind of goes silent, and it's like, what's he going to do? Is he going to score a try? Is he going to do what he did against Munster around Christmas? And he didn't. He only beat 3 Italians in an amazing run that didn't result in any score. So
nearly got an offload though, but it was pretty close. And it was explosive from a standing start, effectively. Like, just that kind of sense. The other thing is Stockdale has a bit of a step too that you really only get to see in person when he's in full flow.
It was a really important day for him.
It looked like he should have laid off for a second try, that the right thing to do was to pass inside you, but it was like, no, I'm going to burn you on the outside and make sure that I've got 2 tries to my name.
Yeah.
That's an extra little point up in the markings out of 10.
The thing is, you look at Jacob Stockdale, and because he arrived on the scene last summer when he goes and has a very, very good June tour, and then November, and with the start of the season in the Champions Cup at Ulster, he's a superstar. And then Larmour happens, and he's like, okay, Larmour's a new kid on the block, and Jacob Stockdale makes a few errors around Christmas, and we suddenly start treating him like a seasoned veteran. He's like, he's 21 years old, he shouldn't be making any sort of defensive errors. So it was vitally important that he had that performance on Saturday, and it seems ridiculous that I'm even saying that a fellow who's 21 has clearly got big improvements to make in parts of his game. He still kind of needed that big performance to kind of ease the pressure on his own position a little bit. 6 tries in 6 games. It's not a bad start to his career. Excellent, yeah. It's just one of those players that I don't think he would have made it without the growth spurt he had in secondary school, apparently. That's what they always say about Jacob Stockdale. And because he was always a wing, he was never going to change position. So then you arrive with this big, massive wing who can hold off challenges. And it's the way he does hold off that tackle for his first try, which was very impressive, I thought.
Interesting story in the front of the Star, if you want to give it over to me. I don't know if this is just stirring up attention for the next time that the RTE panel has both Richie Sadler and Eamon Dunphy on it, but it makes the front page. Sadler made fool of himself. Not a bad Hool. Wesley Houlihan, obviously, is what he's talking about. So Eamon Dunphy, his take is so hot that I actually need gloves to lift the paper here. Sneering Sadler's Wes blast is utterly shameful. Like, it's shameful, right? So that's a picture of Richie Sadler, and that's obviously a picture of Wesley Houlihan. And it turns out that Dunphy read Sadler's piece in the Irish Times and then quotes liberally from it in his own piece, attacking Sadler for making the points that Sadler made about Wes Houlihan. And actually has some like kind of nice little snarky details in this. He's saying about how basically everybody was delighted to lavish praise on Wes Houlihan at the end of his career, and how, you know, as a nation we really missed out on having this street footballer be at the centre of all of our footballing culture for the best part of a decade and a half. But there was one standout who wasn't that. It was Richie Sadler. It was disgraceful and utterly shameful. In a particularly sour piece in the Irish Times, Sadler did his best to sully Houlihan's reputation. And then he goes on, Richie Sadler had to make it all about Richie Sadler. What he wrote on Saturday was damaging and demeaning to Houlihan. And this is Eamon Dunphy, who built an entire career on damaging and demeaning people. But anyway, I've talked to various people who know Wes and who've worked with him. They're bewildered by what Sadler wrote, pointing out that it bears no relation to the reality. So what did he write about Houlihan? And then he goes on to quote liberally, Houlihan's talent flourished when he finally knuckled down. The implication here is that there was a time when Houlihan wasn't knuckling down, when he wasn't doing things properly. In the column, Sadler goes on to elaborate on this. As usual, he inserts himself into the story, breathlessly informing us that he was a consultant to Wes' agent. What a consultant to an agent is, I have simply no idea. So anyway, it's worth digging out the Star. I could go through. I mean, maybe I should go through.
Why isn't he having a go at Kevin Kilban, who also pointed out that a time when Wes Houlihan wasn't entirely focused on furthering himself as a footballer?
Forget the football-loving wonder kid you imagine him to have been back in the day. There were several rough edges that required attention, writes Sadler. I've spoken to people who've played with Houlihan and who've coached or managed him. They are baffled by what Sadler is hinting at. There was no rough edges that required attention, no issues with his lifestyle.
Wow, that's a strong statement right there. And Dunphy in full defence of Wes Houlihan in absolute Monday morning shocker.
This assessment of a fine footballer and classy man was deeply unfair. The Irish Times and Richie Sadler should be ashamed. Shame on you, Richie Sadler.
Is like insulting Wes Houlihan or saying anything bad about him is by law in Ireland these days, I've heard, libellous against Eamon Dunphy. If you insult Wes Houlihan, it's actually more than libelling Eamon Dunphy in terms of Eamon Dunphy's own personal reputation. So don't you dare say anything bad about him. But I'm very interested that it's Sadler, he pointed out. Of course, but when it's down in print, it's much more noticeable when it's there. But it's certainly been said on the airwaves, and as I mentioned before, Kev said it as well, that Sadler is not the only person who's been saying this. It's very interesting that Dunphy's picked him, you know, his right-hand man on the RTE panel. Is there a little bit of murmurings of discontent there?
I mean, look, it's all about the hustle, baby, is one of the central tenets of Dunphy's career. And so people are going to be tuned in now to see the next time that they're on together to go, oh, look, these two hate each other. Hooray.
Oh, I would be astonished if Eamon Dunphy thinks that RT's football is all about the pundits. That would be... that really is just an astonishing, as I say, Monday morning, complete shock to me, all of this stuff.
Kevin Kane has been in touch, I think, on Facebook this morning to say that he's very disappointed with the referee who robbed Longford of victory against Armagh. There was a clear free out. Small counties just don't get the key decisions. He also says he went to the Brentford-Preston match. Judge is slowly getting his sharpness back, but I fear for the Irish lads at Preston, a very cynical side who don't play much football. Which is obviously the complete opposite of what life was like when Simon Grayson was there for them. When actually they were great to watch. They had a bunch of Irish players playing really good football, and you know, it's really unfortunate the way a single manager changes the entire culture of a club.
Yeah, and by extension, the entire course of careers of important Irish players that we thought could become the spine of an Ireland team. It's interesting that he mentions the Longford Armagh match as well. Dennis Connerton was not a happy camper after that game last night, raging, and he was almost getting kind of full of conspiracy after the game when he was saying that this seems to be happening on a regular basis to Longford. Now, I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen a lot of Longford this year, but I did see the highlights last night of Longford Armagh, and I'm not quite sure that this was a conspiracy out against them. I think the referee was favoured in Armagh's favour for sure, but whether or not this is a long-running thing where the referees sit in Croke Park and they're like, do you know who we're going to screw over this season? Longford. I don't think that has quite happened, but Dennis Connerton for sure, not happy whatsoever. Armagh, on the other hand, though, made a fantastic start to life in Division 3. You
were on your way to somewhere?
Inniskeen.
Were you on the way?
Yeah, on the dual carriageway and then U-turn.
How far did you get?
I know, we were just on the motorway in North County Dublin. It's only an hour up the road actually from Dublin in Inniskeen, so it wasn't exactly like we were setting out on this big long journey.
It wasn't like you were coming from Killarney.
Yeah, no, that's true. But a lot of them had done. I think the Kerry supporters group, they do one away trip every year, and I think the weekend just gone was the one. So
they were up on Saturday night.
I presume so, but I'm sure they got a great night out of it on Saturday night wherever they stayed.
Yeah.
And I think it's this weekend coming they're going to refix that game for, which is controversial given it's Sigerson Cup weekend. And should UCD do the business in their semi-final tomorrow, then Kerry will be missing their first choice midfield. So
unless the two lads decide to play for Kerry instead of in the Sigerson Cup, which was a move that happened at the weekend with the Dubs.
That's a very risky business. I'm not sure what the status is with their scholarships or anything like that, but the colleges call the shots. They're literally paying for your college education. I mean, you're not going to screw them over at that point.
Well, Jim Gavin made the point that everybody in that changing room are adults. They make decisions themselves about their education, about their sports career, and about their career as well. So he was talking. Howard played for the Dubs and played well on Saturday night, but actually missed DIT's game.
Yeah.
So I guess. And then, in fairness, Jim Gavin did go on to make the point, it's ridiculous these competitions overlap. Wouldn't it be really easy to wait until the Sigerson and Fitzgibbon are over and start the leagues then?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Fitzgibbon and Sigerson should almost be run off entirely concurrently to the pre-season competitions. And at least that way you're playing Sigerson and Fitzgibbon and that's your pre-season instead of playing crappy McGrath Cup or O'Byrne Cup.
Yeah,
and
it could be March Madness style in February if you wanted to, where it's a month of this and that's the thing that everybody's covering and you put TV cameras on every game and it'd be huge. And then that's like a pre-season. You're having a pre-season going on in the background and then the league starts and away you go. But, you know.
That seems too radical for me, Ger.
Well, I mean, obviously there might be some knock-on impact on club games, but Don't mention the war, I believe, is the appropriate response to that.
Yeah, I wonder will an inter-county game manage to sneak its way into April, given all the games that were postponed. I wouldn't put it completely out of reach at the moment. If the weather does get colder, if there's another weekend of snow, there will be probably an inter-county game in April, which would be big trouble.
You haven't opened a new front on your war on Mayo this morning, despite the fact that Mayo had a couple of red cards in their game against Galway. What's wrong with you?
I think they managed to do that themselves. Of course, I'm not saying that yesterday wasn't another refereeing conspiracy against Mayo, because of course that must have been the case. Sure, they couldn't be anything but. I'm sure Galway were pure thugs, as a lot of Mayo people referred to Kerry as the week previous. I think you called Kerry dirty bastards, I think was the phrase you used on this programme, on air, on the record, in front of a breakfast audience. But anyway, I'm not holding any grudges. So, of course, Mayo could never have been in the wrong. I'm sure the 2 red cards, including Cillian O'Connor's forehand smash, were completely accidental, and the referee just saw it in the wrong light. Mayo, clean as a whistle.
Let's hear from Kevin Walsh, relatively happy Galway manager. He's speaking with Oisin Langan after their game against Mayo.
Are you kind of taking learnings from 2 big games along the road? The Kerry game last year, in which you got forward, had the chances, didn't take them, and maybe the Tip game the year before, the defensive lessons from that and the attacking lessons from the Kerry game, are those 2 that you kind of really take from, and that's kind of part of the formation of this game plan now?
I would say that most teams, I'd say bar Dublin, over the last number of years had 1 or 2 bad days out. I suppose maybe in Galway here we tend to dwell on the 1 or 2 bad outings that we had, where I think if you look a bit deeper, like without agendas of course, you'll find that there was something in there a lot more than what maybe got credit for. So, we've been at this for quite a while. As I said to you, maybe we can look too much more into games, which teaches you lessons, but I think this has been working reasonably up to now.
Yeah, and you've got a deep squad as well. Just before I let you go, a little bit of niggle towards the end. I suppose it wouldn't be Galway Mayo if it wasn't, but what did you make of it all? I wouldn't, to be honest, I didn't see a whole pile of it down the right hand side. But look, what do you expect when you've got people on both sides trying to earn a jersey? It's a big thing to have, to try and get a jersey on your back and keep it. But look, maybe there's 1 or 2 bit of handbags early on that might have started a bit in pushing and shoving. I don't know exactly when it went down, but that's the ref's job. I have my own job in here.
There you go. Arsene Wenger.
The Arsene Wenger excuse doesn't really work when it's an all-out brawl, and that is definitely what you want to watch. It certainly as a spectator, and I'm sure there's a human side to inter-county managers as well, that you just want to watch this thing. But when it's literally enveloping the entire pitch, then you want to watch and get involved. It was hilarious when the brawl initially broke out. In fairness to the referees, what are they supposed to do? He just saw 4 men in front of him after the whole thing calmed down and just booked all 4 of them. I don't think he was quite sure who was actually involved with the brawl, who wasn't, and I don't think, to be fair, in that brawl there was anything that kind of constituted a red card, unless the cameras missed a strike. It was just stupid stuff that just tends to break out at every single GAA match now. If there's any bit of needle between the teams, you will have an all-out piece of scenes basically. I don't know, melee is 4 or more. I think this was more than a melee.
Yeah.
But obviously the Cillian O'Connor thing was a separate thing, and he deserved to go. I do think, in fairness to Cillian O'Connor, he apologised to the player before going off, and it was just a complete rush of blood to the head. There was a couple of moments like that. The Diarmuid O'Connor clothesline as well, another kind of high tackle, and we've had this in all seriousness, we've had this conversation last week about the duty of care that players have, and about the quality of maybe tackling, and the late tackles and the high tackles. I don't want to get into kind of blaming the person who's on the receiving end of it, but the going low into challenges and stuff is resulting in injuries. There's no question about that. And there was a couple of challenges yesterday. There was a couple of challenges in Dublin Donegal that could have resulted in broken jaws, like it did the previous weekend. And I would contend that when Lee Keegan comes out into the media last week and refers to a very dirty challenge, if you look at what Ronan Shanahan did last Saturday week, the very dirty challenges that we saw at the weekend were a lot worse than Ronan Shanahan's. The outcomes weren't. So, I do hold my hands up and say the outcome is important. We've had this conversation. But in terms of the intent, in terms of the execution of the tackle, there were a lot worse challenges in the weekend just gone. We're just lucky that nobody's jaw got broken.
All right, we'll come back to that over the course of the year, as Owen apologises for the violence again and again. Let's move on, because Danny Hughes is with us, and Danny, we wanted to talk to you about one of Galway's secret weapons. Paddy Talley is their coach, and obviously has been he's been around the inter-county game for the best part of a decade and a half now, but he's generally regarded as one of the best coaches in the country. And can you see the hallmarks of his work beginning to emerge with this Galway team?
Absolutely. I would say for me, he was the best coach that I ever played under. And I would definitely put him up there as one of the sole reasons why I suppose we started to, compete at that top level, consistency for a couple of years. But Paddy Tully's a rich history in coaching, having taken Tyrone to the 2003 All-Ireland final, and they won it, as we all know, and they started that great run that they went on over the decade. So, he wasn't there in 05, but he definitely done a lot of heavy lifting. I suppose you can see that bit of Ulster bite, for want of a better word, in the Galway team at the minute. The intensity, the way that they tackle. I would say that if you look at Tyrone, they tend to play positions rather than going and fronting up and tackling. I think Tyrone are a poor tackling team, whereas if you look at this Galway team, Galway are actually, they're getting men round the ball, they're getting pressure on, they're pushing high up the field, and then they're making their way back. So that bit of nastiness that I suppose has always been in Ulster football, you can see that coming through in Galway, and they're safe. There's no point in saying otherwise that 3 wins that they're safe, so they'll be very, very happy with their 3 weeks work.
Yeah, they're safe, but they're also now, I think, able to look forward to the summer with a sense more of proper expectation. Like they've definitely had forwards, and they've definitely had the ability to put a big performance in on a one-off over the last couple of seasons, but you never really would have felt that comfortable talking about them as a team ready to make a leap. Whereas if you come into Division 1 and win 3 games, and you win it in the style and manner that they're winning these games, where they do have aggressive, hard-running forwards who are taking shots from goal from like anywhere within 25 metres, they're looking, I can get the top corner here. Then all of a sudden that kind of radicalises what you think about their potential for the summer.
Absolutely. But, the first thing is you get your defence right. In inter-county football, you get your defence right, and then you go from there and you go and play football. Now, Galway have demonstrated that they have the players. Shane Walsh, Comer. Like, Comer had a great game yesterday. Strong inside. And, they will develop. Conway, obviously, in the middle of the field as well, was very good. And he went up and kicked a couple of beautiful scores. Now, you will see there that they will develop and they will get better. And then they can now concentrate in the championship. They've won a Connacht title, so it's about Galway getting the Super 8s and getting really competitive with Galway, with Dublin. And I think Tally is one of the biggest reasons why I think Galway can go forward with a bit of expectation and a bit of confidence.
Yeah, just on Tally and your first answer there, Danny, about the nastiness that has been present in some of his teams. Like, is that a specific Paddy Tally thing? Does he come in and instigate that hard edge in a team? And how does he do that? How does a coach actually instill that method? And I don't want to use the word nastiness, to be honest there. Just in terms of that hard edge, I guess, is probably the best way of describing it.
Well, it's not... Paddy, he lets footballers be footballers. Shane Walsh, he'll not overcoach Shane Walsh. Shane Walsh is an exceptional talent, for example. That's the best analogy. Shane Walsh is so quick, good off both feet. There's very, very few players like him in the country. Shane Walsh is, I suppose, his Achilles heel at the minute is decision making. And I was watching him very closely yesterday. Shane Walsh is beginning to not go gun-ho, go straight down the middle of a defence and get bogged down and turn over the ball. Shane Walsh will develop as a player under Tally, and he'll start to make better decisions. And I suppose that's what Paddy Tally, first and foremost, is a football man. So that edge, he'll demand honesty from all the players. He'll demand that they go on the front up and there's no excuses, but he'll do it in the right manner. He'll not talk down to them. He'll treat them very much as adults, and he'll have a good rapport with them. Paddy Tally doesn't really have a problem with anybody who has a different opinion. He'll accept it. He'll try and take it forward. But you will see players like Comer, like Shane Walsh, they'll get better decision makers. And yes, that bit of Ulster edge or nastiness, he will encourage them to, not embrace the dark arts, but he'll not shy away from it either, because Kerry, as you've seen, Kerry have accepted that, and they have changed how they play. Dublin, is there a more clued in team as regards to checking players? I don't see that Dublin is the purest team that everybody says they are. They're a brilliant team, an outstanding team, but they're also very accomplished in the dark arts as well. So I would see Tally as a first class, experienced and top class coach. I think Galway got a real coup in him. And Kevin Walsh, this last couple of years, I suppose maybe he's been under pressure, and he's alluded to it there in his interview. He said that maybe if people really analyse the Galway team, they'll see they're not far away. But he will. He understands that he had to change, and taking in Tally was masterstroke.
Do you not think it's bad for the health of Gaelic football that, you've mentioned it yourself, Kerry and Dublin having changed tack to a certain extent to kind of indulge in the dark arts a little bit more? Galway have brought in a selector who you've outlined there yourself can help in this regard as well. Do you not think that this is a worrying trend, Danny?
I would say no, and I'll tell you why I say no. Gaelic football has always been about contact. It's always been about, I suppose, strength and manliness and all that. I would say that Gaelic football has went too timid this last couple of years, if anything. What I don't like, people talk about the brawl and the melee yesterday. I didn't see it as a melee or a brawl because nobody actually threw a punch. It was a lot. Do you know what it was like? It was like a load of young lads that have lifted too many weights, and there's too much testosterone, and they're nearly trying to prove themselves to the other man. That's it's nothing more than that. If they could cut that rubbish out and just get on with the game, a couple of good hard hits. But there wasn't a punch thrown. Funny enough, there wasn't a punch thrown, but it was all a lot of pulling and dragging. It's just get on with the game, you know what I mean? But in Aussie rules, they just get on with the game, and they let anybody that want to, chest up to somebody else, to just let them get on with it, and they play on. I would play on, and that would be the simple way I would get rid of it.
Obviously, this is somebody you know really well because he was with the Down team in 2010, won the Sigerson last year, almost out of nowhere with St Mary's. So all the way back to 03, there's an incredible track record of success there for this guy.
Oh, yeah. And the thing about Paddy is I was surprised Paddy went to Galway because I actually felt he was a number one. And I think he sort of felt at the time, this last couple of years, he was a number one. Obviously, winning the Sigerson Cup with St Mary's is a wonderful achievement. Anybody that knows Sigerson football will say that they're really living with a small pool of talent. I think the last time they won it was 89 or 87. But for me, Paddy Tally was a number one. He had done his time as a number two for a few inter-county teams, but he's decided to take that gig on in Galway, and that Galway will certainly reap the benefits of it. So it depends how long Paddy wants to be in the background, but I would say it's only a matter of time before he gets a gig by himself, and you never know, he could be back to Down.
All right. Things are going all right for Down at the moment, though, right?
Yeah, Down are going well. At the game last week, Cork just had a wee bit more. They got a fortuitous enough goal, and Down have struggled in the middle of the field. But yesterday, Down tend to play around midfield at the minute, and I think they did that yesterday. And they were worthy winners yesterday. But Roscommon don't seem to be going great for whatever reason. But Down done very well. Down's done well, and you'd be hoping now that I will say staying in the division was the big thing for Down, and certainly look like they've gone a long way to doing that with yesterday's win.
Just a final word, Danny, on what happened in Croke Park on Saturday night. Donegal coming remarkably close to finally stopping Dublin in the regular season, I suppose, of the league, which they haven't lost in a couple of years. But in terms of Donegal, it seems to be the best start a team has ever made, while without winning any single game. Every single game they've played so far, they've been very impressive against Kerry on the first day, and brilliant in parts on Saturday night.
Yeah, Declan Bonner's really, he's developed a bit of a cult following among us aesthetically pleasing supporters, but the natives, will the natives be happy if Donegal play the best brand of football that Donegal's ever played and not win an Ulster Championship or Sam Maguire? So that's the trade-off, and if Declan Bonner and the players are happy playing that team, it's the pressure from within. It's the pressure from within Donegal. That's going to be the true test. Do they go out and win an Ulster Championship playing a defensive game that they've been used to playing, or do they go forward and possibly not win an Ulster Championship, get beat by teams that maybe aren't as good going forward? But that's the trade-off, and I suppose Declan Bonner he's probably taking the right approach to the league, where he is actually going forward and developing a new side of Donegal's game, with the benefit then of going possibly and making sure that defensively they're sorted out going forward, for the championship. But it looks like they're going to be relegated at this stage, but it doesn't seem to worry them too much. But for the championship, I still see them as heavy contenders for the Ulster Championship, and I don't think they'll be too worried about a National League. I think they put too much energy into it over this last few years, and then have been legless when it comes to Croke Park. So I don't think they'll be too worried. But as you rightly said, it's a breath of fresh air. Yeah, no, for sure. One last thing, news breaking this morning that it looks like Bernard Brogan's done a cruciate, and we all know what a cruciate means for somebody. It generally means that's your season gone. There's some talk that they might try and rehab the injury as opposed to going straight for surgery. But at this stage of his career, it's a sickening blow, really, considering what an amazing career Bernard Brogan has had. Yeah, cruciate. I think he's done it before, has he? Yeah. I think he's done it before. Yeah. Cruciate for Bernard Brogan. Well, the way I would see this as Bernard Brogan keeps himself in a great nick. He's got the best, probably one of the best medical teams around him in Dublin. I'm sure Bernard Brogan won't want to go out of county football with an injury such as a cruciate. You come back from a cruciate in 7 to 9 months. Yes, it wouldn't be this season, but Bernard Brogan would still, for me, I think he could still come and make an impact if he wants to. That's if he wants to. He never really considered retirement, I don't think, this year. He still wanted to soldier on. So I think, there's a lot of things there. I suppose he's just got married and his business is going well. I think Bernard Brogan could give it another year, and I don't think, if I was Bernard Brogan, I would want to prove that I could come back and do something with Dublin, even if it's 15 or 20 minutes, which he's sort of got his head round now. So I don't think that's the end of Bernard Brogan. Certainly not. I think he'll still play club football. So why not take the advantage of the best medical team and continue on with Dublin, soldier on with them, and possibly, if he wouldn't it be nice in a few years, in a year and a half or 2 years, to come on an All-Ireland final even for 10 minutes, and it would be I suppose a way of helping him through the rehab, because it is a long 9 months and it's a very, very tough journey. So I would say, if it was me, I would soldier on and take the advantage of being within a leagued team like Dublin. But it's terrible news for the fella, and it's not the way you want anybody to finish an inter-county career, but I don't think that's the end of him.
One last question, Danny, and it's on Bernard Brogan, but it also ties into a piece that Declan Bogue wrote in the Examiner last Saturday week, and you were quoted in it yourself. And you spoke about Down after the peak in 2010, when I think you and a number of other seasoned veterans in the team had picked up injuries, and at that point you started to get alienated a little bit from the camp. Your input was no longer valued, despite the fact that you had been part of Down's best success, I suppose, in getting to an All-Ireland final so far in that century. Do you think that there could be some sort of future for Bernard Brogan, even in the short term, if he's just some bit fit, you know, he's able to do a bit of jogging, he's able to be involved in training in some regard, to have some sort of input off the field almost? This is a thing I've very much championed, I suppose, because I was at the cold face. But when you're 32, 33 years of age and into county football, you're not finished. You're not resigned to the dump. You're still a huge influence around young fellas. Young fellas with the best will in the world will look up to you. I remember when I came in 02, 03, you know, you still had Mickey Linden, James McCartan, people that you know, set standards in training, etc. And them guys were, you know, the middle to late 30s. And the ironic thing about them at that time, it wasn't seen as a 32, 33 wasn't a prerequisite, right? Let's talk about retirement here. I know for, you know, Mark Poland had every intention in Down of continuing on, but, you know, when he I suppose, the encouragement, he wasn't getting the encouraging signs that would say that, you know, he was going to be a part of the long-term plans. And for, you know, every season's different. You look at Mayo, or the player of the year last year, and Andy Moran, you know, he played some of his best football, far cleverer, far more experienced, making far better decisions than he was 10 years ago. So, you know, Bernard Brogan will have a huge influence in management and players. And somebody coming in looking for his position, for example, or Con O'Callaghan, what better man to give him a bit of advice than Bernard Brogan, from a playing point of view, from an experience point of view. So, you know, I think a lot of managers, possibly at times, I feel they're afraid of being challenged by more experienced members, or I think that maybe experienced players in the squad mightn't just buy into their way of thinking. But Bernard Brogan and Jim Gavin obviously have a good relationship and a trusted relationship, so he can play a massive part. Bernard Brogan can still play a massive part in this year, injured or not, and going forward for Dublin, like Donegal have with Carl Lacey. Yeah, and speaking of experienced players, and you mentioned Donegal, there was footage of Michael Murphy doing sprints on Croke Park, I think half an hour, 40 minutes after the full time, just to make sure that he was getting his warm down properly. That's Eamon Donoghue of the Irish Times had that on Twitter up, back doing extra runs in an empty Croke Park, a bit rusty in his comeback, but it's good to see him back too. Great to have you with us this morning, Danny. Thanks very much for all that. Thanks, guys. Take care. Danny Hughes giving us some thoughts there on the big football stories from the weekend, and some insight really into that extra bit of steel that we're seeing from Galway. Steel, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Well, I'm glad he used the word nastiness himself, because, you know, it can become that after a while, can't it? Or it can be viewed as that if you're on the receiving end of it. Comer looks pretty good though. Comer is class. He's absolutely class. The McHugh goal as well yesterday was an absolutely glorious finish, and I think you alluded to it there with lads just taking pot shots. No, sorry, not pot shots. But they look like pot shots, but it's actually like, okay, I can hit the corner, no problems. Top corner, bottom corner, side netting, I can do that. There's an element to that to Donegal as well. Was it Tony McLenaghan with that chance that hit the post in the first half? Jamie Brennan, sorry, Tommy just told me in my ear. My apologies for getting those two mixed up. That was another kind of almost like McHugh, just having a shot when it looks like the point is definitely the most likely option, but when you come up against a team like Mayo, or you come up against a team like Dublin, you need to take your goals whenever they're available. And that is the one criticism of Paddy McBrearty's performance. He was otherwise outstanding on Saturday night, which is in those opening stages when he had that goal chance to just try and pop one into the back of the net, because I think you're going to need to score 2 or 3 goals to beat Dublin. Let's go to the Winter Olympics. Cliona Foley is at the Winter Olympic Games and joins us now by Skype to talk to us about an absolutely enthralling opening few days. Cliona, how are you getting on?
Morning, gents. You could say from the sublime to the ridiculous. That's awful news about Bernard Brogan. I hadn't heard it, so that's really tough news. Oh, it's terrible. It really is, because you know, you just saw the hunger in the opening couple of league games where he was getting out in front of defenders and, you know, playing a slightly different role, but like clearly desperate to be a part of this team into the future as well. So Danny Hughes reckons he's going to be able to come back, so I hope he's right about that. How are you getting on? Well, fine, but I'm at a Winter Olympics where there's too much wind, believe it or not. The last 2 Winter Olympics, they didn't have enough snow, and out here in Pyeongchang in South Korea, they have too much wind. So for the second day in a row, one of the Irish competitors didn't get to compete because Tess Arbez, her giant slalom race was cut off this morning, and the wind is causing havoc out here. There's loads of controversy over the slopestyle finals. The men's last night and the women's today were both kind of really, they went against the grain because it was a lottery, on the last few jumps. And the slopestyle course is massive, it's absolutely huge. And on the last 2 jumps, which are particularly big, they're getting caught in the wind, literally in the air. So the women's final today was pretty awful. Every single competitor had one fall at least.
Cliona, to what extent are those conditions throwing up some of the incredible results we've had over the last couple of days, like Red Gerard, the 17-year-old American, winning the slopestyle, as you mentioned there, and then Felix Locke not winning in the luge was a huge result.
Yeah, now the luge wouldn't be as affected by the conditions, in fairness, but definitely it is a factor. And the Red Gerard one is a classic one. He wasn't expected to medal there at all. I don't know whether you've been following his story. It's an amazing story. He's one of 7. He's 17-year-old. He's the second youngest gold medalist ever in the Winter Games after Tony Neiman, the famous Finnish ski jumper. If anybody's as old as me, they'll remember him. He used to look like Solly Gunnar Solskjaer. He was a blondie guy. He used to fly into the air. He was brilliant. But Red Gerard is a real character, and I don't know whether you saw his press conference afterwards, did you? But I just said, what a touch of light relief from some of the problems that are happening in press conferences back home, because he was asked if his family were enjoying it, and he said, well, they rang me at 8:30 this morning, they were shotgunning beer. And one of his brothers is quoted saying, if we're not in jail after a night out, then something's gone wrong.
I'd say the Athletes' Village is a pretty fun place to be at the Winter Olympics, Cliona.
I think it probably is all right, yeah. But I mean, I suppose like every athlete, they can't, they really probably can't let their hair down until they're into competition. And the thing that makes the Winter Olympics so, I suppose, tricky is that they get a lot of weather problems. So, like Pat McMillan and Tess Arbez now have both had one of their events put back. And so, you're faffing around for a few days. She was on her way up in the gondola this morning up to the start line and discovered that it was called off, so it's that late. But it was minus 20 degrees up there this morning and reportedly 100-mile-an-hour winds, and they just said, no, they're not going down that. And as I said, the fact that the slopestyle have gone ahead in the slopestyle finals, I've seen lots of people complain. There's Ed Lee, anybody who watches Ski Sunday would know Ed. He's the snowboard expert in the BBC, and he was saying the women's slopestyle today probably shouldn't have gone because it just made a lottery of it as well. Okay, so that's the impact. It is that it kind of blows people off course. Just in terms of some of the Irish competitors, when do you expect them to go out then? If it's been put back, is there a scheduled time, or is it wait and see? Yeah, they get rescheduled. They get put back a few days. So Pat McMillan was meant to go in GS in giant slalom on Sunday, yesterday, and that, I don't know what day of the week it is, frankly, lads, but that was put back now until Thursday, and his slalom has been put back a day. And Tess Arbez was the same today. She was meant to go in giant slalom this morning. That's been put back till Thursday now, and she's gone in the regular slalom anyway. So they just make room for it, and the schedule has room for it to be put back. So they always leave room in the Winter Olympics because this kind of stuff can happen.
Thomas Westgard was obviously one Irish athlete who did manage to get out on the course in the cross-country skiathlon, I think, yesterday, the 15 by 15. He finished 60th. Cliona, would that be considered a very good result for an Irish athlete in this event?
Yeah, it's a tough event, and he's relatively inexperienced, and he was the last man to cross the line, but actually 8 more didn't finish it at all. And you see, snow in pictures always flattens out. Anybody who's ever skied will tell you it's terrible to take photos. You think you've been down a really steep slope and it doesn't look like it in the pictures. That's skiathlon course had some phenomenally difficult climbs in it, and I'm told the total amount of climbing in that course over 30k was the height of Carrantoul. So that's the sort of thing that happens, whereas you imagine always cross-country skiing to be completely on the flat. It's actually not in this instance at all. So he was pretty wrecked after, but he's recovered okay, and he's going to go, he's one of the 3 Irish who will be in competition Tuesday. But the one to watch really for me is Seamus O'Connor. and he's the guy who at 16 competed in Sochi. He was the youngest I think in the whole Olympics, maybe. That might have been a 15-year-old Japanese guy, and he just missed making the final in Sochi. He did his cruciate last year. He smashed his leg badly, and he's just back from it. So it's really interesting to see how he's going to come back, but he's doing well on the World Cup circuit. So he's cut it back to just one event now. He's used to do slopestyle and half pipe, and he's only doing half pipe here, and he's putting all his eggs in that basket so the knee holds up. And he is in qualifying tomorrow, Tuesday, and he needs to make the top 12 to make the final. So it's a big ask, but this guy is really talented. I mean, he was one of the best, certainly the best 15 in the world 4 years ago, and I would say he's certainly one of the best top 20 in the world at the moment.
So for the neophytes, what's half pipe?
Half pipe is you take a pipe and you cut the top of it, and it's a giant wall, a U-shaped wall, right? It's 22 feet high on both sides, and they go down it, looping up and down the sides of it, doing a series of tricks. But the one here is the biggest they've ever seen, and they used it in China this year for Grand Prix. So they reckon that when you go, like they go up higher, way up high off them for their jumps, so they're probably coming down from about 35 feet in the air to land on what is basically a curved solid block of ice, and go up and down the sides doing tricks. And it's pretty tough stuff, because if they land, there's no forgiving. And what happened to him when he did his cruciate, well, he went up and he went so high that he missed the curve on the way down and landed flat in the middle of the pipe, and completely did everything. He did his medial, his cruciate, his cartilage. He did everything in his knee. And actually he did it in the first World Cup in New Zealand 2 years ago, and they held him in hospital for 2 weeks. He was so bad, and they fed him blood thinners because they wouldn't let him fly back to America. He was so wrecked. So he's come back from that sensationally. He actually he came back to compete this year in exactly the same competition a year later, and within 5 months he's back at the Olympics. So he's a really serious athlete.
And how is Pyeongchang? What's it actually like? I mean, I know you you end up on a lot of buses and stuck in traffic going to media centres as opposed to actually getting to look around.
You sure do. And they're not your average. We always laughed here at the media buses. First of all, I was on a bus yesterday morning, and I heard an Eastern European journalist in front of me say to his friend, my mother, she sees more of the Olympics than I do. And this is always true for journalists, because you're literally getting to one venue or two venues a day, whereas everybody at home is watching everything on TV, and TV looks fantastic and shiny and glossy. But the media buses here are a sight to be seen, because they look like a karaoke party. They've got flashing lights, they run up and down it, and they're pretty amazing. And the other big problem for journalists and everybody else out here, of course, is battery power. So your mobile phones die in the cold weather. You have to put them up your sleeve, or somewhere really warm in your body to try and hold on to the power. And my pens froze at the cross country, so I brought 3 different pens out of the cross country for Thomas yesterday, and all 3 pens froze, so I couldn't write with them. And so that's all the kind of stuff that makes the Winter Olympics great fun.
Tommy says you've got to show us the mountains in the back. Apparently there's just out the window there.
Well, yeah, you can see behind me there, so it's just coming on about 6:30 this evening. So again, that's flattened down, but there's 2-3 nice slopes there.
Well, listen, have a great time.
Yes, I'll keep in touch.
Thanks a million. It's Cliona Foley out in South Korea, Pyeongchang, at the Winter Olympics. You've got mad into it.
Massively. I guess I'm glad to say my bio clock's in a good way at the moment. So wake up on my day off, Saturday, 8:30. It's just naturally, I'm like, oh God, what do I do with my day? Oh wait, the Olympics have just kicked off. Throw on Eurosport, which is now up to 5 channels at the moment during the Winter Olympics. Speed skating from Saturday morning, which is the world's greatest sport.
Is it?
It is absolutely nuts.
They kill each other.
There's the short track speed skating. The long track isn't so fun, but the short track one, particularly on Saturday morning.
So listen, assume no one's ever seen it.
It's a race, but you're on skates on ice, and you go around.
Short track, how short?
I'm not actually. That's a good question. So I think it's 7 laps in a 1500 meter, so about a 200 meter track.
Circular.
Yes, 1500 is the best one. Like they do the 500 as well, but it's just too short almost. The 1500, there's more chance of falling over a longer period of time, and then they go to like this VAR, which is awfully dramatic whenever there is collisions, to see who's actually at fault, which is very exciting altogether. And also in the short track on Saturday morning in particular, it was just constant shots of Mike Pence, because it was like the stock footage that Eurosport were drawing in. So whenever they went to like a bit of a break, where I don't know what the commentator was doing, but it just cut to static shots of Mike Pence. So it was kind of like Big Brother, where you're just watching Mike Pence sit in his seat for about 2 minutes straight, and he wasn't even doing anything or chatting to anybody, and then they get back to the action.
Oh, okay.
It's brilliant, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it was like was he speaking?
No, well, kind of like chatting to the Korean ambassadors or whatever that were beside him. That was brilliant. But like the luge yesterday took over. The snowboarding yesterday was fantastic as well. And of course,
our half piper, he's a snowboarder.
Yes. And of course, the mogul. The first thing anybody says whenever they're watching that, including myself, is that you've got a very high chance of arthritis after this, just because of the way it wrecks your knees. And the French person who won it yesterday, Perrine Lafont was her name. An outstanding performance from her. But what happened was at the end there was this Canadian performer in this who was expected to win a medal, was nowhere near it, so she had to absolutely go for it. But as Tina said, the winds are so high that if you're off just a little bit, you're screwed. And she got blown right off course. You're like, this is amazing. The tiny margins that you talk about in all other sports are magnified so much when it comes to Winter Games, particularly in the luge, which was just one of the most dramatic results ever yesterday.
Yeah, why? Because the favourite got...
Yeah, the favourite was kind of, you know, the way if you're off by an inch, it completely skews your turn and you lose a huge amount of speed as a result. All he needed to do was kind of do an error-free ride. Felix Loch, the German former champion, and he ended up finishing 5th.
Is it over, the luge?
The men's luge is, yeah. The women's luge...
Skeleton still to come, or is the skeleton over too?
I don't think the skeleton's over yet. I haven't seen it. I think I've watched enough to be across the major medal events, and I haven't seen a lot of skeleton yet.
Okay, so it's not too late for anybody who wants to see Death
No,
Defying.
it's never too late. Just get on that now. It's amazing.
All right, good stuff. Pretty much all we've got time for today. Owen's going to be in with Nathan tomorrow, so it's Mayo versus Kerry round 27.
Yeah, well...
They actually hate each other around the office. This is not a fake hatred. It's like a real thing.
It's just annoying. He's just annoying me now.
Yeah, he's watching apparently at the moment, so how are you, Nathan? He was just making sure that we didn't say anything bad about how filthy Mayo were yesterday.
Well, Mayo are never filthy, Joe. It's always the referees that do them, and it's always the opposition that rile them up, and that accidental forearm smash from Cillian O'Connor just kind of tends to happen, as opposed to the malicious attack from Ronan OGara the week before.
This is the bit that they clip now on, you know that? That's the bit that goes viral.
No.
Right, as I said, that is pretty much all we have time for on the show this morning. As ever, you can follow us on our social channels. We're going to play out now with the emotional and touching tribute that Brian Kerr gave on Premier League Live on Saturday after the tragic death of Liam Miller. Those pictures of Liam and his family and his wife and kids, who obviously are now facing into life without their father, really captured, I think, everybody's imagination over the course of the weekend, and just how difficult things are going to be for them and for their family. So nobody better than Brian Kerr to capture that emotion properly. We'll play out with this.
Yeah, it's devastating news for everyone that knew him, but particularly so for his family. Philip, Bridie and Billy and his three brothers and his sisters and Claire and the kids. It's just awful. I mean, they've had to look at Liam and, you know, and mind him and care for him over the last few months since he came back from America, knowing that you know, he probably hadn't got a very long-term future, but it's still absolutely devastating news that he's passed away. Actually, quite suddenly in the end. I mean, I know from speaking to people that he was out and about. He celebrated his daughter's birthday out in a restaurant last Saturday, and he was out for a meal with Graham Barrett earlier in the week this week, but he just deteriorated sadly on Thursday and passed away last night. As you said, I had the good fortune to see him as a 16-year-old. Just before he went to Celtic, I just started in the job with the underage international teams. In my first match, we played against France up in Tadhg Rovers ground. We lost 2-1, and I had Liam in the team, and I knew from then that I was dealing with someone that had something special about him. You know, he was a small little lad in the middle of the field with good passing ability and great energy, but he also had the determination and a grace about him that meant that you wanted to have him in your squad, you wanted to have him in your team. He was quiet, he was shy, but on the pitch he was tidy, he was aggressive, he was courageous, he was brave, he was all the things you should want from a player. And he delivered in lots of big games. with teams that I was involved in, I was lucky enough that, you know, to be part of it when the team won the European Championship, the first time ever an Irish team won, which won in Scotland. There was a big Celtic crowd there that night when we beat Italy in the final. And, you know, we went on from there, played all through our teams, got into Celtic's first team. I picked him for the international team in 2004. He came on, I think, against Czech Republic in his first game. I was waiting for him to emerge along with Colin Healy to come into the team. I remember teasing Roy Keane when I was trying to encourage Roy to come back there. We could end up with an all-Cork midfield playing in the senior team. It never actually came about that all three of them played together, I think, in the senior team, but certainly they played together in pairs. And Liam was a very, very good player, but a fantastic lad. And, you know, I got to see him playing with the various teams through his career, through his international team. But he was always still the same humble, shy, hard-working, decent lad who it was a pleasure to meet and have a little laugh with. And, you know, we had a little bit of time with him in Australia in Perth in 2013. He went there to play for Perth Glory. They got to the final of the league. He was the best player on the pitch. They were beaten by Brisbane Roar with a last minute goal. And then he went to Brisbane the next year. They signed him up and he played in Melbourne. He had that sense of adventure about him that not too many Irish players have had. One or two have gone on since then and followed the steps to Australia, but not many. And then he went after a spell with Cork with John Caulfield and with Colin Healy in the middle of the pitch. Having lost the league to Dundalk in the cup final, he went off again, got on his travels again, and was brave enough, went out to America and was playing in America. So, you know, he was still playing up until a year ago. He started coaching, and then in the last few months I just heard he wasn't well. And I couldn't believe it. He was the fittest of the fittest and the bravest of the brave, and it's just awful.